everyone. Welcome. We're going to let people join in, and then as they do, just let us know where you're calling in from. All of the moderator or all of the panelists and I were just chatting the last time we had this conversation. It got pretty vulnerable and raw. So I'm assuming the same thing will happen for this conversation. Feel free to use the Q&A to drop questions or just share your experiences with us, and I will do my best to moderate that as we go. At Augie, we know that becoming a working parent is a huge transition, whether this is your first or your second, one that comes with a mix of excitement, uncertainty, and let's be honest, anxiety too, but maybe some people are looking forward to it. Whether you're preparing for leave in the thick of it or stepping back in your professional role, you are not alone. I promise you that, although sometimes it may feel like that. So today's discussion is about providing real practical insights and reminding you that you have a community of support behind you in Augie and in all of these amazing ladies here. Um, if you are returning to work, drop it in the chat, maybe with a word about how you're feeling about that transition. We were just talking to Andrea, and she does this as her side hustle and is returning back to work tomorrow. So she is in it with you all. I'm pregnant and an entrepreneur, and we were talking about those two things of mat leave and running a business don't always go hand in hand. So if that resonates, I'm here from you. Anyway, I get winded because I'm so pregnant. I will kick it off with intros. And Leah, I'm going to start with you just because you're first on my screen.
Okay. My name is Leah Trebus. I'm a registered nurse and international board certified lactation consultant with the Lactation Network. At TLN, we provide insurance covered lactation appointments where you want to be seen. So whether that's in your home, in an office setting, or via telehealth, and we're available in all 50 states.
Amazing. And you're my new friend.
Yes.
Hi, Elizabeth.
I can go next. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Shackelford from the Mom Project. I run our brand and social here at TMP, and I am a mom of two. I have a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. That half is very important. So I've had 2 mat leaves, and so, both are very, very, very different. So I'm excited to share insights and how we can kind of help you build your return to work journey that works for you.
Great. And everyone's my new friend, so I'm not going to say that after everyone's introduction. But Paige, you are next to my screen.
Hi, I'm Paige Connell. I am a content creator and advocate that speaks on the mental load of motherhood and the childcare crisis specifically. I am a mom of 4 kids. My oldest almost 8, and then we have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and another 2.5-year-old. And so we've got a busy family over here, and I have taken 3 mat leaves because my oldest 2 were actually adopted, and so it was somewhat of a unique, different experience.
Cool. And Andrea.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Bombino. I run Andrea Bombino Coaching and Consulting. I sometimes say I do that. I have a day job and then I do that at night. But the reality is Lily, to your point, entrepreneurship is kind of an all the time thing. Yep. I started this business when I was on mat leave with my first child. So my daughter is now 4.5. I had her while I was living and working in Australia, working at LinkedIn, and I had a year of maternity leave. My background is in sociology, and I've studied motherhood studies. So that means I actually understand the sociological implication of becoming a mother in our modern day society, specifically in Western culture. I'm a certified career and life coach. And I also have a variety of qualifications in matrescence. So the concept and the physiological, psychological aspect of becoming a mother. And so everything I do is really from the perspective of how does mothering impact your career and how does your career impact your mothering? And I'm a massive nerd. So could talk about this stuff for ages.
Great. That's awesome. And then Kate.
Me too. Here's to the nerds, the mom nerds.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Kate Georgalis. I am Director of Partnerships for Hello Nanny. We are a nationwide nanny agency that offers concierge placement and also DIY placement support for families that are navigating the search on their own. I am also mother to 2. I have 2 daughters. One is going to be 4 in a couple of weeks, and the other is 5.5. So I'm dealing with my first year of kindergarten and 1 in preschool right now. I am also a certified fair play facilitator and also a certified perinatal behavioral health coach. So my love and passion for this space and supporting women and mothers through this transition runs deep. So happy to nerd out with this group any day of the week.
Yeah, you got a shout out for nerd parents. I want to read some of the words that came in for that icebreaker at the beginning. Returned to work yesterday. It's been overwhelming, but nice to focus my brain on something else. Anxious, a struggle. So this person returned to work 12 weeks postpartum, breastfed and pumped at work until a little over 14 months after being laid off in the fall. I'm feeling nervous about getting back to work. I get it. And on that note, let's dive in. So preparing for parental leave. What should parents think about before they go out on leave? And Andrea, maybe I'll kick it off with you if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. I like to think of this as a bit of a who, what, where, when sort of situation. So first part being really around like creating a transition plan, understanding what are the top responsibilities or projects that you're handling that you really don't want to get overlooked while you are on leave. So understanding, is this a short-term thing? Is this a day-to-day task? Is it something that can go to a peer or a colleague, or is it something that you need a manager, or even if you are lucky enough to work in a business that has a temporary coverage team for things like parental leave, identifying those and then trying to ideally work backwards. If you know an estimate of when you're going to be going on leave, what's the highest ticket, most priority task or series of tasks that need to be handled, and how can those be delegated first, and figuring out from there, like what is, so the what needs to be delegated, the who it needs to be delegated to, when it needs to be done, and then the how. And I like to think of the how as like, not how would I do it? How would I manage this project or these responsibilities? But how can it be done in a way that if it's external, like client facing, can be done in a really good way for whoever is involved. What are the logistics of how it needs to be done correctly? And then also relinquishing some control, knowing that it is not going to be you that is doing it, but really being clear on what that expectation is, and then how, if you are going to be taking these responsibilities or projects back on at the end of the time that when you're coming back, even proactively discussing how it should be given back to you makes a really big difference in how you can get reintegrated and reestablished in the business as well. So are you going to be picking up that project midway? If so, should there be certain shared notes, and what's the handover process going to look like when you're back, so that it's not something that you're left being like, oh my God, this is so much to do. And during that time, it's also about really communicating expectations and boundaries. So again, like, what is the expectation for when you're going to be leaving and what you might be coming back to? When I worked at LinkedIn and I was going on leave, I specifically said, like, I want to be given back X percentage of my book of business. How can we make that happen? I knew that I was going to be going on leave a week before performance reviews were happening. So I specifically reached out to my manager and to HR and said, I want to schedule my performance review before I go. I asked for a raise. I asked for a title promotion. I asked for more responsibility for when I came back. And also happy to say it did happen while I was on leave. I got those things, but I had to ask for it first. So I think that all helps to also set up for that confident return, knowing that you've covered some of these things in advance. I think can really set you up for a return that feels as easeful as possible, knowing that it's also can be a really stressful time too.
And then Elizabeth, just how can employers better support leave planning? And like, I guess just to add on what Andrea just said, like, what do you ask for up front?
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately in the US, it's up to that most often it's up to the employee to create that playbook. But I think, we see that when employers invest in a strong maternity leave policy and a return policy and, that covers the gamut of what you might need, it results in happier, productive employees that stay. So like, creating a good program helps retention. So it helps the bottom line. So it's better for companies just to invest in this. But I think no matter if it's your first time taking leave or you're with a new company, just like make sure that you know what they offer and how you can use that to your advantage. Do they offer flex time back? Can you work flexibly leading up to the birth? What do your doctor's appointments look like? Like really make sure that you know what HR has outlined. And also talk with your manager if you're comfortable. Really try to talk with your manager about how you're feeling, what you're dealing with, and hopefully you have a two-way street of like, they can help you navigate. Even like sometimes I think when you're in the first trimester and you're feeling like
Oh,
absolute,
horrible.
like you don't feel well. And so I think sometimes too, if you're comfortable saying that up front, it will help you in the long run because then you're able to be like, I wasn't on camera for that meeting because I was throwing up. But and then I think the other thing is like have some guidelines with your manager about how you want to be contacted. So make sure that you say, I want to know, if things are really big happening in the business, please let me know. Or you're like, I'm MIA, like don't call me. And I think too, set up a meeting with your manager like a week or two before you come back. If you're comfortable, set up that proactively. So when you know you're coming back, so that you have some time to like get kind of reacclimated and your brain can kind of like turn back on the work mode. Because it's hard to kind of get back into that groove. And I think the other, sorry, I'm looking at my notes because I have to jot things down.
And I'm
But, like,
looking at
give
the
yourself-
chat if you see me looking this way.
Yeah, I was looking at the chat too. I was like, but like give yourself grace because this is so hard and it's not you, it's the system. So know that it's just not you struggling to return to work. It's just how it's how it's built right now. Those would be my top takeaways. And I think, just these are small ones, but start midweek. So when you go back, start on a Wednesday. So
Oh, that is a
2 days.
great tip.
Start midweek. Do not go back on a Monday. Terrible idea. And then start childcare a week early so you can try to get into the groove.
Yeah, and yes, that's such a good, yes. And you can like feel a little bit comfortable with whatever that care plan is.
Yeah.
Kate,
I was going to say,
speaking
speaking of
of
broken systems.
yeah, I feel like some of them, like when I'm speaking to my friends, the most anxiety inducing thing is the childcare search, whether it's a nanny, whether it's daycare, because especially if it's your first, you don't know what you don't know. And so it's hard to picture what that's going to look like. So when should you start considering and evaluating options on leave?
So I think my recommendation is if you have the ability, start thinking about it before leave, because what you decide, if you decide to go with childcare and you want to go with a traditional childcare center, depending on where you are, sometimes wait lists are longer in certain places than they are in others. So you'll want to really start researching that sooner than later. If you know you want to go the nanny route, whether it's part-time or full-time support, that is a different time frame. So you certainly can do that while you're on leave. We recommend giving yourself at least 4 to 6 weeks to complete that search, ideally up to 12 weeks if you can. But I think just starting the process to learn a bit more about your options so that you can discuss it with your partner, or if you're parenting solo, you have the opportunity to learn more about what's available in your area and really think through, what does your schedule allow? What does your commute require if you have a commute, if you have other children that are part of this equation? Because I think, especially if it's your first, if your experience is anything like mine, I think you're juggling a lot when you're on leave, and you just don't know what you might be experiencing when you're going through it. So also grace is going to be a key theme in this conversation. Give yourself grace. Don't hesitate to ask for help, and know that no matter what, if you make one decision, you can change that decision. So you have the option. You're going to need to change and evolve as your needs evolve and as your child's needs evolve. So don't put too much pressure on knowing exactly what you need right up front. Seek out advice from, whether it's an agency, friends, colleagues. Getting perspectives will help you feel more confident in your own.
Yeah, that's awesome. Paige, I'm excited we'll get into the mental load soon. I'm sure you have lots to say on that subject and who it falls on in most of these households across the country. But before we get into that, Leah, I know you have a lot to say on this topic. another thing that comes with anxiety is the pumping and feeding logistics when going back to work, especially if you work from an office. Can you walk us through
Yes.
how parents should approach that?
Yeah, I think obviously the more proactive, so I'm hearing all these buzzwords from my co-panelists here. The more proactive you are about this part of going back to work, the better. So if you meet with a lactation consultant prenatally, what they're going to do is they're going to assess the type of work you do, where's your desk located, where are your break rooms. They're going to help equip you for those conversations you need to have with HR, your benefits department, or some of those things along with these other types of coaches, to just say like, what's the logistics behind it? When you sort of remove those question marks, the stress level goes down. If you have colleagues you can talk to that were lactating and came back to work, absolutely lean into them too. I hear mixed things from my patients in terms of like, oh my gosh, my manager's amazing and so open, and we have an open door policy, or I'm really scared about asking for time to pump. I'm really scared. And so everyone is so unique in that environment. So having that prenatal visit to sort of address all of the things leading up to your birth, but also so that your lactation consultant may be taking these notes to kind of get ready for your back to work visit. So if you're not able to have that prenatal visit, you absolutely can. It's not too late. You can meet with a lactation consultant in your postpartum period. I recommend typically like 4 weeks would be great, all the way up to like 2 weeks prior. I like a little bit more time because I like to address the misnomers around a breast milk stash, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think just thinking through the logistics of, again, it's 2 weeks prior to me going back to work or 4 weeks. Who's going to be taking care of the baby, and how are we giving them instructions to warm up your breast milk and those sorts of things. And then also just making sure that we deal with anything that you're feeling nervous about. Some people will be like, I'm nervous. We don't have a separate fridge. I don't want my coworkers to be grossed out by my breast milk. Which, by the way, as a nurse on a mother baby unit, my coworkers were grossed out by my breast milk, which was like so insane to me. But I think saying, okay, then we get you a cooler bag, no one will know if it's your lunch in there or your breast milk in there, right? So unfortunately, kind of like other people have mentioned, we have to sometimes fit into a box. I wish we didn't have to, but that's just life. And so I think being really open and honest with yourself about what you're nervous about, talking to your lactation consultant about it so that it can be addressed is so helpful. So just quickly on the stash, social media, my patients talk about this all the time, really make parents feel inadequate about their supply when they see someone storing massive amounts of breast milk.
The chest freezers give me
Yes.
like nightmares.
Yes. And I'm like, actually, that's pathologic supply. But I really want you to know that typically for most scenarios, and this is individual to everyone, but 3 to 5 days of a stash is appropriate, can be very appropriate. So you need 1 day for your first day back to work. And then what you pump today, your baby ideally will get tomorrow. Now, do we have busy meeting days? Absolutely. Do we spill milk sometimes? Absolutely. Does our caregiver spill milk sometimes? You bet. And that's what those extra 2 to 4 days of stash are for. But I really like to address that because it's a harsh thing to be like, gosh, well, when I pump, I only get a half ounce after my baby breastfeeds. Well, guess what? Your baby emptied you. So a half ounce is appropriate. Yeah. And so I think just really, again, having someone you can lean on to say, like, rather than having to lean on, an Instagram picture or something to be like, is this appropriate? I think is also just very, very helpful because our mindset is such a big part of the breastfeeding journey. That having that, like someone who was going to tell you the actual facts is very, very supportive and helpful.
Awesome. I love that. Elizabeth, walk us through what this pump act is, because you taught me about it last time, and I think everybody here deserves to know. Also, we got someone pumping right now on this call, another mom pumping at work.
And Lily, your comment, let's go. I'm
Yeah,
like
let's
cheering you
go.
on too. So under the Pump Act, if your company has more than 50 employees, you have a right to a reasonable break time and a place to pump that's not a bathroom, that is shielded from view to express your milk while at work. So you have federal rights to pump and take time away from work to pump. I'm sure
Oh,
that there's
Elizabeth, that's not in your car, right?
that's not in your car.
Yeah.
That's not in your car. That's not in your bathroom. Like you need a place to pump, and a place to store your milk. So know that you have like rights. So I would check out, I'll put it in the chat. A Better Balance has a great like resource on everything that you have that you is available to you. So I'll take a look. I'll pop that in the chat so that you can read
Cool.
through that, but know that you have rights. And Leah, I'm obsessed with the prenatal lactation appointment before you even
Me
start
too.
this journey, and then also how you can prep for going back to work because that's such a new phase. And I'm like, wow, my mind was blown when you said this. I was like, that is so smart because so often we hear from women about like, how do I do this? How do I manage this without my supply tanking or, any of those things? But I think as Leah mentioned, talk to your manager. And if you're comfortable, talk to your manager. The other thing is block time off in your calendar. So make sure that you have these pumping blocks so that people cannot book over them. And then another tip that I heard was enlist a colleague or a peer to be your eyes and ears at meetings that you cannot be at. So if you're pumping and you can't be at a meeting, like have someone take notes for you or be like, I'm here for Elizabeth filling in, like I'll relay all this information so that you don't feel like you're missing out. You like just know that there's ways to accommodate this, but I know it may sound daunting, but I think also as Kate mentioned, you can evolve, you can change your mind, and it will happen. Oh wait, Lily, you're on mute.
My floors are being redone from a flood, so I don't know what you guys can hear versus not. So that's why I'm muting in and out. Can you hear it? Are we good?
No.
Okay. There's a quote I love from Cecile Richards, the former president of Planned Parenthood. And I know not every person on this call is a woman, but the quote is, if you want to get something done, ask a busy woman. And on that note, I think managing career growth after leave is another thing that is anxiety inducing, especially for women. So, Andrea, how can parents stay on track professionally while also balancing new family responsibilities? And then, Paige, if you're okay, I want you to chime in here too, because I felt like we did a nanny share. So not only was I doing a nanny, but then I was managing another family, and I felt like the mental load of having to now bring on, that was a full-time job almost. So anyway, Andrea, I'll start with you, and then Paige and Elizabeth and Kate, you can all chime in as well.
I just want to start by echoing what Leah said earlier about being able to change your mind. That goes for your professional career and the trajectory and the timelines that you have set forth in your mind. Maybe it was when you were a young child and you decided that you were going to be this sort of profession by this age or make X number of dollars by whatever time frame. As I often remind my husband, we're probably, hopefully, not dying tomorrow. There is going to be more time to accomplish all the things you want to accomplish. And so I actually think like one of the ways to kind of set yourself up for success is to, number one, recognize that motherhood and parenthood does change you. It changes everybody in different ways, right? And for some, that career push and pull feels monumental, while for others, it might feel smaller. Even for people that have had a fairly easeful return back into the workplace after parental leave, sometimes they get hit with like a stack of bricks, it feels like, from what I've had my clients tell me, 6 months in, a year in, at major milestones, like when their kids go to kindergarten. So knowing that it's all normal to feel it at different points and in different intensity, I think can create that ability to have self-compassion for yourself. And from there, like acknowledging that adjusting to this new normal takes time. I know we talk a lot about the return to work. I am very particular in calling it the return to paid work, because we know parenting is all about that unpaid work, that unpaid labor. It is a 24/7 job, and it doesn't stop when you return to paid work. So even if you're leaving the house, or whether you're working from home, like the person who's at home pumping right now, like it's still work. You are still engaging in that mental aspect. To Paige's point, it doesn't leave you. And so being able to understand that, like, adjusting takes time. Giving yourself that grace will allow your confidence to start to kind of build back up. And something that I like to do, and I do with my clients, I do with my husband and for our own household too, is like talking about our professional goals out loud, friends, family members, and being able to just sit confidently with that ability to change your mind. And even if you put something in your calendar as like a once every 6 months, to sit down for 30 minutes with your favorite cup of tea, coffee, matcha, wine, whatever, and reflect on like what you've learned about yourself during that time, how you're evolving, how the way you feel about your job or your profession or your career is changing. And again, kind of sitting with that without the self-imposed judgment to constantly go, go, go. And having lived and worked in APAC, I've kind of seen a different side of how crazy we are as Americans and how we operate in America with this like set a goal, achieve the goal, don't even bother celebrating. Maybe you get a bottle of champagne as like a, ooh, I did it. And then you just set the next goal and you go and you achieve and you achieve and you achieve. And that's just not sustainable. So being able to build your village, your network at work, if you've got like, I'm a big proponent of having a work life, and having someone that you can lean on, I think it was Elizabeth, you made the point, like ask somebody else to fill in on these meetings for you and give you that, the context that you may have missed, like surrounding yourself with other people who have your back, and who may be on similar journeys or who have been in these shoes before can make a huge difference to normalizing how tired you might be at times, how you might be lacking in confidence at times, and also knowing that confidence will return eventually. But it's all about like figuring out what is a sustainable pace? What does that look for? And again, to Leah's point, like if there are things you could be doing before you go on leave, like thinking about what a sustainable return to work looks like today instead of, the day before you're doing it or when you're already in the thick of it, allows you to separate a bit more from the craziness of it. And so being able to recognize that success is it's not about doing everything. It's about picking the most important things. And a few years ago, I was on a panel and somebody on the panel said, you are replaceable at work. You're not replaceable to your family. And so no matter what, I often think like at the end of the day, if you are depleted, not only does that negatively impact you, it impacts your family and has that trickle down effect. And I don't really believe in like the whole pour into yourself so you can pour for others. I'm like, well, what if I pour into myself so much that I'm overflowing and others can have some of that overflow, but I also need to be full. It's really, really important for me as an individual, as a woman, as a person to do that for myself. And also recognizing like that's not always possible if you're returning to work 2 weeks after having a baby. It takes time. And we know that about 25% of Americans go back to work in less than 2 weeks. So holding space for a lot of that self-compassion can make a world of a difference too.
Yeah. Paige, I know we were going to come to you. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think to Andrea's point, one of the things I think we can do to prepare in advance is have the conversations about the unknowns, right? We know as women that the work of childcare disproportionately falls to us, the work of the domestic labor at home disproportionately falls to us. And you might have an amazing relationship, but when you return to work and you have this new baby, major shifts tend to happen. And a lot of women find themselves in this position where they say, I always had like these huge career goals and I was so ambitious and my husband was so supportive. And now I just feel like that's not possible. Like that just doesn't feel possible. And oftentimes I think it is hard to take a step back and realize why it feels that way and to look at the nitty gritty details of our lives and say, okay, it doesn't feel possible because every time a kid gets sick, I'm the person who's taking a day off and I'm the person who's getting the phone call. And we also know that women are twice as likely to adjust their careers or leave their careers because of gaps in childcare or the cost of childcare, right? And so I think it is okay if some days it feels impossible because sometimes it feels that way for a reason. There are systemic issues at play, there are societal issues at play. And so I really like to remind new mothers in particular that it's not because you did something wrong. It's not typically because you didn't prepare well enough or you don't have the right partner. It's oftentimes because all of these compounding issues come into play, especially when we return to work after having a new child. It is this just massive transition. And so I want people to feel comfortable saying out loud that they're struggling with certain things, because I think oftentimes we are very fearful of doing that. We are afraid to say, I don't know how to pay for daycare. Like, I don't know how to pay for this. This is crazy, right? We're afraid to say that out loud. We're afraid to say we're struggling with maybe our partner not doing their fair share of sick days with the kids because we fear judgment or repercussions from that. And I think the more we do that, the more isolated we feel and the more impossible it feels to continue. And so I really do think a big part of returning to work and making it successful for me was just saying that stuff out loud, like saying it
Yep.
to my coworkers, saying it to my husband, saying it to my friends, saying it to my boss. I was like, hey, daycare's crazy and everybody's sick. And like, what can we do to navigate this? What can I do here at work? How can you best support me? What options do I have for flexibility? What does this look like? Saying it out loud, I think, has such value. And oftentimes, I think as women, we are really trying to navigate it on our own without having to ask for that help or to speak up. And I think when we do that, ultimately, it's a disservice to ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And Elizabeth, I hear so many people finding so much value out of places like the Mom Project. And to Leah's point, you can change your mind. You can change careers if you want. We recently had Neha Roosh, the author of The Power Pause, who Elizabeth, I know you know, and she was just like, if you think of your life as chapters, like of course the chapters can change. So talk to us about the Mom Project and just how they support working moms.
Yeah. Well, the Mom Project was started almost 9 years ago, because like we believe that moms shouldn't have to choose between work and family, and there's a way to make it work. I mean, I think we're also dealing with, as Paige mentioned, we're dealing with some systemic issues that make this very hard, but know that you have options and know that there are family-friendly employers out there who support your career journey and your journey as a parent. I think the other thing too is it's okay if you come back to work and you're like, I think I can just coast for a little bit. Like I'm not ready to climb that ladder. I'm ready to just stay where I am, get the job done, and go be with my family. Like I think so many of us see this like, as you know, Andrea mentioned, this career ladder that we have to climb and rung by rung, but know that it's not linear. And someone said recently, like it's a jungle gym, and sometimes you just have to find
Yep.
a different path. So I think so often we get back to work and we like the brakes stop because we're like, wait, I don't want this is not my sole priority anymore. Where it was before, you'd be like, yeah, I'll do that work trip. Yeah, I'll do that happy hour. Yeah, I'll go to, but no, I don't want to do that. I want to log off so I can go pick up my kids from daycare and spend the evening with them. So I think your priorities change, and that's okay. And so there are so many opportunities out there to find work that works for you. The Mom Project has a ton of different categories of work, whether that's part-time, full-time, remote, contract, flexible, in office. Like there are things you can find something that works for you. So keep looking. But I will note that the job market is not what it was in 2022 when we were all. So know that it's also not you, it's the job market. So consider freelance, consider upskilling, like consider if you're taking a career pause, think about how you can use those opportunities like volunteer work, what you're doing in your community as resources to help continue you on your career journey, whether or not that's paid or unpaid work. So I think the bottom line is like, know that it's not you, and it's okay to change your mind, and it's okay to not feel like I got to press the gas full speed all the time, because your parenting journey evolves and you evolve, and you just have to remember that.
We will share. I see the chat. We'll follow up with a DM with more information on the Mom Project and everybody else on this panel and how you can get more resources moving forward. Kate, having a village or a care team to lean on, talk to us about that and how somebody, your right-hand person can support your career ambitions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, something that I really want to encourage anyone on this call listening to really digest is every mom needs help. Whether you are at home and you decide to be a full-time stay-at-home mom, whether you're working part-time consulting, you're working full-time, you're an entrepreneur, everyone needs and deserves help, and hiring help to support you is not outsourcing raising your children. It is impossible to do everything. And even if you're lucky enough to secure that spot in childcare, or your kids are old enough to go to public school now, or you have a full-time nanny, there's still so much that needs to get done outside of the hours of work and school. So whether it's meal prepping for the week, laundry, the house, signing up for camps, there's all of the things that go into the childcare list and the domestic household list of things that need to get done. And I think oftentimes it's a big part of what I love that Paige talks about is this is what disproportionately tends to fall on women in a heteronormative relationship partnership. And I think it's so important to think about what you need to support your mental health and your relationship if you are in a partnership, and understand, I think a lot of people, the costs of childcare in this country are astronomical. And it's really important to think through and not just see it as a single person's salary. This is an investment. If you're in a partnered relationship, this is an investment in both of your abilities to invest in your career, to invest in your retirement if you have the ability to do so. But it's also for your mental health as well. It's a support system to give you the space to take care of yourself, and to also have a little bit more control over how you get to show up as a parent and a partner. Our CEO and founder, for example, she shifted from having a nanny to having a family assistant, and the family assistant helps with a lot of things like meal prep. She'll do 20 hours a week supporting the family in a number of ways, whether it's household organization or meal prep, so that she can go to her son's karate lessons, or she can do pick up or drop off. And some people, they prefer to have help in certain areas. There's certain things that they want to outsource so that they can be more present for. So I think it's really important to, it's a little bit of a gut punch when you start to realize the numbers that go into childcare, but the numbers are more than just, okay, how much do I make and how much does childcare cost in this year? This is a finite period of time where it's going to be more expensive. Those expenses will still exist in some way or another as the needs evolve and as the schedule for school changes. But it's important to think about the bigger picture when you're thinking about childcare, and understand that it's okay for your needs to change. I've been lucky enough to have a parent close by to help during some years. I had a part-time nanny at others. I had my kids in a preschool, a Montessori preschool at other times. And now I have one kid in public school, and the needs evolve over time. So I think it's just important to recognize that everyone needs support throughout this journey, and it varies for everyone. So definitely try to reduce the guilt and the stigma around asking for help or putting money in your budget towards that for periods and seasons in your life.
Someone said, we have decided for me to stay at home with our daughter primarily because of our childcare costs, which we get. I want to do it, but having help in other areas could be so helpful. Yes, 100%.
Absolutely.
And Paige, coming to you next, because we're all thinking about it, the mental load. How can parents protect their energy and set boundaries at home and work? And truthfully, like, I'm no expert in this. My nanny told us months ago she's taking this Wednesday through Friday off, put in my calendar. Obviously didn't think about it again till last week. And now my husband's like, the whole team is at work, like in person this week, so he can't help me, and so I'm going to Virginia to see my dad. And it's just, that is an added layer of stress now. But just talk to us about the mental load.
Sure. So the way I like to think about the mental load is that it's the never-ending to-do list in your brain of all the things you need to know, do, and remember. So remembering that your nanny's not here and knowing that you need to figure something else out, right? Having that conversation.
Put a calendar invite hold reminding me to prepare.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot. I personally am a person who puts everything in my reminders app on my iPhone, and I'm looking at it right now, and I have 47 reminders set currently. Like, that is how many things I'm thinking about and need to keep track of. And if I don't put it there, it's probably going to get lost somewhere, right? And that sounds like a lot. And I'm in what I would consider a very equitable partnership. So my husband also carries his share of the mental load. But I think the thing I really think about as we head back to the workplace, especially if you are a new parent in particular and you haven't done this before, but even as a parent of multiple children, you're always reassessing. This is an ongoing conversation. The conversation about the mental load and domestic labor and invisible labor is not a one and done conversation. It is something we are always talking about. We are talking about logistics every single day. As we were on this call, my husband was texting me. He's like, I'm staying late at work. You got it? I'm like, I guess so. Right. So we're having these conversations every single day and talking about how to navigate our lives. But the mental load tends to be that invisible stuff, the stuff that you're just thinking about constantly, knowing that Friday's pajama day at school for some reason every single week. And you need to remember to put your kids in pajamas, right? Remembering that you need to bring the snow gear because it's still snowing here. All of these things that you're keeping track of. And I think what happens oftentimes is, again, women disproportionately carry this work, and it can impact how we show up in the workplace, right? If we are the person who's kind of always keeping track of everything, one, we have less mental space, right? Less time to rest, less time to relax and recover from our work days and from parenting. We're kind of always going. That is exhausting and it can lead to burnout. And so I think it's very important to first and foremost just understand what the mental load is and how it shows up in your life. And so I encourage people to start to kind of like keep a list if you don't already. Just write it down for like a week or two and just see what you're carrying, because when you do that, you're making it visible, not just to yourself, but eventually if you want to your partner as well, to have a conversation to say, "Hey, this is too much for me. It's probably too much for both of us. Can we outsource some things? What are the things that maybe we change? How do we navigate this so we both feel supported here and so things feel fair?" And I mean, we also know that there are things like the motherhood penalty that we are working against as women, and I think the mental load is often not talked about as much, but there's this assumption that women by default do all of this work, the housework, the kids, packing the backpacks, the lunches. And that assumption leads to bias at work, but it also leads to burnout. And so just simply being aware of the mental load and knowing what it is so important, because I know personally I didn't. And I remember waking up one day being like, what is happening to my life? And how did I get here? And I'm so exhausted. And I couldn't say why, I couldn't articulate it. And so I think just being able to start talking about it out loud and having these conversations is incredibly important. And then you can really navigate how you handle it, what that looks like, how you build support systems around it. And also knowing that in periods of transition, maybe you're going from one kids to two kids, unfortunately, the work doesn't just 2x, right? It normally feels like a 4x or a 5x. And so if we know that before this child is coming into our home, how do we prepare for that? How do we reassess? How do we readjust our logistics as a family? Having these kinds of conversations can be hugely impactful, not just for our home, but ultimately when we have equity at home and have conversations around the mental load at home, it impacts our careers. It impacts our ability to show up in the workplace in the way that we want to go after those dreams if you want to, those ambitions that you might have. And so having that starting at home as parents is really critical.
Thank you for sharing that. Everything that you're saying, I'm like, check, check, check. I just for the sake of time, Leah, I want to make sure we get to something which we do another event and Leah's amazing on it, called your Care Team 101, like how to build your village postpartum, but it leads into returning to work. And I didn't work with a lactation consultant the first time, and we talked about how I'm going to book an appointment now that I'm pregnant before this baby comes. But Leah, can you just talk to us a little bit about how lactation consultants can be a part of your support system even after birth? I know you touched on it a little bit, but just a little extra wisdom there.
Yeah, so I think what everyone's saying is it rings true just from what I've seen in my own life with my kids, and then as well as with the patients that I see time and time again. And I think our society oftentimes rewards this idea that as a mother, we're martyrs, right? Like we sacrifice and we're praised for this sacrifice. We're praised for overextending, for doing too much, for showing up and baking the homemade cake for the bake sale, while needing this report to be due at the same time. And I think repeatedly I see that pattern come out with patients who aren't prioritizing their own health. And so, lactation care is healthcare. And during that part of time where you're navigating your body leaking milk and making milk and feeding your baby this way, should feel like you're right to seek health care by a healthcare professional, which would be a lactation consultant. And so, we support families from that prenatal period all the way through weaning, and that can look different for everyone. It may be I do a prenatal appointment for a mom that's going to formula feed so that I can help her dry up her milk and not get an infection. It may mean that I do a prenatal appointment for a parent that is going back to work after 4 months. And so her journey looks really different. And she's a teacher though, and she can only pump when her students are at a special. And there's all this dynamic that goes into it. And so I follow some families for years. I mean, 2 years, and then I get to follow them for their second group. And so I think what's so important about looking at healthcare, and this goes for other types of healthcare providers, is you deserve care. You have to take care of yourself. So whether that's a mental health care provider, whether that's a nanny or a helper in the home, whether that's a lactation consultant, these things, are part of the village, right? That's supporting you. And I think leaning into that, and I have some families that like lean into me heavily, and I'm like getting text messages and emails. And then I have other families that I have to like draw the parent out and say, it's okay to tell me you need to adjust the plan. And it's what everyone else is saying. We are not robots. We aren't all the same. And so it's always good to have a plan A, B, and C, and be as flexible as possible. And so a lot of times that's what we're doing. We're just saying, let's take care of you. Let's also take care of your body. Let's look at this holistic approach. And that's just super important. You have to give back to your health as a parent, I think.
Yeah. Yes. I want you to say your line.
Oh yes. So my line is, I'm going to need to like get a placard of this, but my line is that lactation is the only time when you can have a swollen body part that's leaking fluid and not have regular medical care. So it's not a normal phenomenon for that to happen in any other time. Give a man a swollen knee, and try to say what? Oh, I missed what Lily said. But yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? Like when we really look at what we sort of endure alone or in isolation, it's silly. So definitely know what your rights are with your healthcare plan and lean into the healthcare providers that your insurance company supports.
Thank you, Leah. I love that. My nanny also just walked in wearing an Auggie sweatshirt. So on that note, Kate, just quickly, and then if anyone has questions, I want to make sure that we have time to address them. What should you look for if you are considering a nanny in a childcare provider, and how can the right fit specifically reduce stress for them? Hi.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one thing that I like to say is if you see a mom that you think is doing it all, know that either she's not doing it all or she has a lot of help. And I think that having help, whether it's your partner, family, or hired help, it works out best and minimizes the most stress when you have time to think through what your needs are. And I think that this can be really hard when you're a first-time parent. You only know what you know. So if you have peers, colleagues that you can lean on and ask them, what would they do differently, and better understand, the types of things you may need help for. I also highly recommend, if you're familiar with Eve Rodsky, her deck of cards is a great exercise, even just for yourself. If you're not ready to have a bigger conversation with your partner, just to kind of think through, like, what are the things that I'm going to need to think through when it comes to my child, the day-to-day of being a parent, and this house. what am I doing? What's my partner doing? And what can we outsource and what doesn't matter in this deck? I think just really being thoughtful about that, thinking about, you know, making sure that whatever candidates you're looking at have proven history working with children. It kind of depends on the family if you want credentials in early childhood education or development. But I think one of the things that's most important is when you're checking references. Someone can be a really great fit for one family and the wrong fit for you.
Yeah.
So know that, a great reference isn't necessarily a signal that they're the right fit. Learn a little bit more about the family and what success looks like for them, what type of support they needed when you're going through that process. And I definitely highly recommend, if you can, partner with an agency or reach out to friends who've navigated this process before, because it's a bit of the wild, wild west. I think, it's a big part of why we created our DIY product, because when I went through this 5 years ago with my first, it was just, I was cobbling together information across the internet. How do I write a job description? Where do I source candidates? How do I check a reference? How do I write a contract? There's all these things that go into it, in the same way that there's an immense process when you're hiring someone in the corporate space. You're bringing someone into your home, and it's going to be a wonderful resource to you and also your child to have another adult to look up to and create a relationship with. So having some guidance to figure out that journey is so helpful along the way as well.
I want to get to 2 questions. The first, Kate, to you. Can you explain what the family helper does the 20 hours a week? Is it to watch the kids or prepare food and keep the house in order?
It depends. So a family assistant, it can vary. You have a little bit more leeway with how you approach that role, but I think it can be a mixture of things like meal prep, household organization, errands that need to be handled for the family. But there also can be light childcare duties like occasional pickup and drop off or bringing them to after school activities. It's more heavier on the admin and logistical support for the family. But there definitely are scenarios where we see people include a little bit of light childcare in there occasionally as well.
Cool. Okay, Elizabeth, great. You saw that, but just in case everybody didn't, headed back to work in a couple weeks and facing a new mandate around return to office and a really long commute. Curious about what rights postpartum and or lactating moms have in terms of reasonable accommodations. I know, Leah, do you have anything Elizabeth shared a resource, but I don't know. We have a lot of visitors.
Yeah, sorry. So unfortunately, I think Elizabeth touched on this. We have a lot of issues in this country in general around these sorts of things. So one would like to say, you can approach your work about this, and there are legally not a lot of accommodation, unfortunately, unless somehow you're able to get on like short-term disability or get some sort of physician note around something to do with like your healing or all of those things. So really what it boils down to is, again, having those conversations. And one thing that we do as a company is we actually will do some trainings for managers where we say to them, like, do you want to retain your employees? And this is how. And we talk a lot with those groups about why people silently leave the workplace while they think everything was fine, and then all of a sudden their employee's giving a 2-week notice and they're like, I didn't know. Well, were you talking? Was there open door policy? So I think this is a perfect example of a time when this is something you could approach HR about and say, I know there isn't anything in place. I would like to think that other people would benefit from a shorter workday for these moms. I'll check emails before I leave my house for my commute, and I'll do this when I get home, but can I have a shorter like face-to-face workday? And so I think like thinking through those logistical pieces, again, either in a preparatory way or now that you're navigating this, kind of having to ask those questions. But honestly, yes, they're not mandated to make those changes. So unfortunately, there's not a lot in that part. I don't know if Elizabeth has, yeah.
Sounds like
Well,
someone check out the Mom Project.
Yes. And first of all, we are seeing like a lot more return to office mandates, which is just, kind of crazy. And it's a huge disservice to moms in the workforce, but you'll manage. And I think too, there's lots of resources to kind of understand how you can advocate for flexibility. But I think something we often talk about is like, do if you have to try it out and prove that you can do it and be like, this is not working. So I think instead of I I know it's, but like even if you're interviewing for a job and it's, in office, but you would love to be flexible, like wait until you have the offer in hand to then kind of see what you can negotiate, because I think you have to just see what's more important to you. Is it, bringing in an income or flexibility, and kind of weighing those two. And it sucks that we have to address this and like think about these things as logistical issues, and we don't have policies in place that just uplift us from the beginning. But there are some like tangible things that you can do to set yourself up for flexibility down the road after you've kind of given it a go, and then you can see how it works.
Leah, quickly, does Lactation Network also advise on combo feeding?
So I always say this to every patient that I see. My goals have no agenda beyond what a parent's goals are. And as I said before, those goals often change. We all have our ideal scenario that then turns into like, whoa, this is different than I thought. And so when a parent comes to me with what they think they want to do, I'm going to set up plans that are going to support that.
Yeah.
That could change. So that may be a parent off the bat saying, I want to do half and half. And then we talk about establishing supply and when it's appropriate to start introducing that combo feeding and like what that will change in their body, and then all those pieces. But IBCLCs are absolutely equipped to help families that want to do any amount of, whether it's like chest or breast, or it's just straight exclusive pumping or a combination with formula. We're definitely equipped to help with whatever that family's goals are and really support that.
That's awesome. No judgment.
That's right.
Leah, Elizabeth, Paige, Kate, Andrea, thank you so much for this conversation. It is so needed, and I know so many people have found value out of it. I know I did. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being a part of our community. To everybody who is on the call, we will follow up with resources that we promised, as well as more information on all of the amazing panelists and potentially their companies, if relevant. So looking forward to seeing you in the community, and thank you all. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank